It wasn't so much a winter but a summer of discontent for Andrew Johns. Recovery from a back injury was followed by groin surgery, then a surfing mishap. But recent weeks have seen a change of fortunes for the champion halfback, particularly in his only trial against North Queensland.
I copped a few heavy knocks up there and took the line on a few times and made a heap of tackles, so got the confidence back and just can't wait to get out there.
That'll be against New Zealand on Sunday, with Johns expecting to face a massive crowd at Ericsson Stadium following the Warriors' success last season, and as usual, a few massive forwards. However, it's the halfbacks match-up with Stacey Jones that could provide the most interest to fans, a man who last year claimed the Golden Boot Award from Johns, and therefore the official title of World's Best Player.
The thing is, we're just going to shut Stacey down. We shut Stacey down, we shut a lot of their play down. His form last year was unbelievable.
Meantime, the Knights have put a slight increase on some home game ticket prices down to a 430% hike in public liability insurance. Gate prices will go up by $1 with the exception of family tickets, while the club has also avoided passing on an increase to families in pre-purchase prices. Figures there actually going down.
So far the only calls we've had from members and supporters have been supportive.
One of the largest primary school comps in the country, the Paul Kelly Cup got underway locally this morning with youngsters in the Lake Macquarie area first to stake their claim for a state final spot. 12 boys and mixed teams contested pool matches at Belmont under the modified Aussie rules format, with sides from Swansea, Charlestown and Dudley qualifying for the regional decider in May. To basketball, and it's understood the new owners of the Canberra Cannons will be transferring the NBL licence to New South Wales. If given the go-ahead by other clubs later this month, most games would be played out of Newcastle, Maitland and Gosford, while contract talks with Cannons players and some imports have already begun. Meantime, there's been a great result for Kurt Barnes in the lead-up to his Australian amateur title defence starting next week. The Muswellbrook golfer won the Riversdale Cup in Victoria, breaking a 32-year score record in the process. Fellow Hunter players James Niddies and Nick Flanagan also finishing well. Colin Baldwin, NBN News.
Matt and Kurt Gidley have played in the centres together before, but not right from the start of a match. In fact, it's believed it hasn't happened since the heady days of the mid-80s, when two brothers Mortimer dominated the position for the Bulldogs.
We're looking forward to it. We've both had a fair bit of experience playing in the centres, so I hope we can do the job on the weekend.
But the sibling combination could be short-lived, with Mark Hughes getting fitter by the day after a full knee reconstruction last year.
I think Mark Hughes is probably 2 or 3 weeks away, so when he's fit, I'd say he'll come back in left centre.
Today, the team had its final training session at home before taking on last year's grand finalists New Zealand in Auckland this Sunday. And while the first game of the year won't make or break finals prospects, a win will reward some hard pre-season training.
It's a tough game first up. I mean, the Warriors had a tremendous season last year, making the grand final, and them, like every other team, would like to open the competition with a win, especially at their home ground. So it doesn't really get much tougher than our first game this week.
For the youngest Gidley, it's also set to be a new experience.
This is actually my first trip to New Zealand. I didn't go over last year, but from the sounds of things, it's pretty intimidating over there with their crowd and that sort of climate over there. So it's going to be tough.
Cullen Robinson, NBN News.
It's an exciting time of the year and we're about to launch into another Telstra Premiership, and the NRL has done a great job with its early season duties. The new jingle for 2003, That's My Team, has been well received, and it's definitely the most dynamic campaign since the Tina Turner days. It's interesting, the concept for the campaign came from Parramatta assistant coach and ex-Sharks player Alan Wilson, who rocked up to the NRL marketing team with nothing more than a CD and a piece of paper. He'd made some word changes to the hit Hoota Guru song, and with that simple concept, outpitched the big advertising agencies. It seems to happen every year. The NRL again made on-field rule changes, and the one causing the most conjecture is the Golden Point rule, where we see the eradication of the draw. The two teams will play an extra 5 minutes each way. The first team to score a point wins the match. Now, I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the referees. They'll be reluctant to blow the whistle for an infringement during that time, particularly if the penalty is given within kicking range. Now, I've selected my top 8 for this season: the Roosters, Knights, Bulldogs, Broncos, Parramatta, the Dragons and Warriors, Sharks, Manly, Raiders and Storm also. You can see the rest from there. That's how I think they'll line up for the year. And here's my tips for round 1. And to kick off, I've gone for the Roosters over the Eels tonight at Aussie Stadium. In the double header tomorrow at Telstra Stadium, I've tipped the Dragons and the Bulldogs to win. In other games, I've gone for the Sharks, Broncos and Knights to get their season away with a good win. Enjoy your football. I'll see you next week.
It's simple. Matthew Bingley doesn't want to leave Newcastle, nor does he believe his performance on or off the field has warranted his release next season.
To actually go in and not being offered anything, I think probably hurt me more than anything.
As a professional, though, he understands the nature of the business he works in, but he will draw on some added motivation during his final weeks at the club.
Look, I could probably sit back and go, I just want to win because they've got rid of me. I want to stick it right up them. Probably part of me is going to do that. I'd be lying if I didn't say that.
One of 4 players not offered a new deal, and with 6 others still in negotiations, the skipper just wants the best possible result for his team this year.
Big thing is, I think, after last year, I think a grand final berth would be something that I'd really like to finish off on and, hold a cup for Newcastle.
He's determined to find a new club, but after moving here 2 years ago, Bingley will always call Newcastle home.
I will be back after it's all finished.
The club, meanwhile, was confident late today of securing a Sydney-based gloveman for the final series, and talks are said to be well advanced with both a Parramatta and Olympic player to join the club next season.
Just before midday, a 16-year-old Merriweather youth wandered off from a group of hikers, falling 20 metres down one of the many sheer ledges on the western side of Mount Sugarloaf. Families enjoying a lazy Sunday in the picturesque surrounds knew something had happened when police blocked the top car park and the Westpac rescue helicopter landed. The rest of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards participants made their way back to the car park, unaware that their friend had suffered fatal head injuries. The Westpac rescue helicopter again landing, although this time the fight for life was lost. The bad news eventually filtering through to those involved in the day's activities. Police are now preparing a report for the coroner. Walking tracks on Sugarloaf are popular, but in many places there isn't much room for a mistake. The magnitude of the accident will be felt for some time. Friends and family of the 16-year-old wondering how a day filled with high-spirited fun could end so tragically. Cullen Robinson, NBN News.
They came together just hours after the first strike on Iraq, people of all ages gathering in Civic Park to voice their opposition to war. As storm clouds threatened, protesters marched through the city chanting anti-war slogans and singing songs of peace. Watched over by police, the crowd stopped at the office of Federal Liberal Senator John Tierney, delivering a resolution opposing Australia's involvement in the conflict.
Very saddened. I'm ashamed to be a member of Australia at the moment. I don't feel this is democracy anymore.
The fact that we are not being listened to by our own government is the thing that is absolutely disgusting.
While emotions ran high, the rally remained peaceful, with police reporting no trouble. And we haven't seen the last of the peace protests. Even as action escalates in the Gulf, another rally is being planned for here on Newcastle foreshore this coming Sunday, while there'll be prayers for peace tomorrow. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
After avoiding the spotlight since the scandal was made public, Glenn Oakley agreed today to give a brief interview attempting to explain why he made false claims about his qualifications.
I made a mistake about almost 20 years ago now and told some lies about the qualifications that I had, falsified testimony in that respect, to get a job during a time that I was desperate.
But the lies made almost 20 years ago weren't just a once-off. Over the years, they were retold again and again to companies to gain employment in state government and corporate sectors. But it still doesn't explain how he could get away with the lies for so long.
I was a student at each of those universities. Circumstances prevented me from completing the degrees.
But there are still inconsistencies with his story. Mr. Oakley claimed he didn't have 3 university degrees, but in fact, he has no degrees at all. Harvard confirmed he does not have an MBA, but merely studied a business management unit there.
I know that my performance referees have spoken very highly of what I've achieved, but that is no excuse for telling a lie and not rectifying it.
He says the false claims were taken off his CV more than a year ago. Yesterday, Mr. Oakley was asked not to take up his new position as General Manager of Randwick Council and now admits he has a bleak future.
I'm at the bottom, so I have a good family, a strong family, a wife and children that really support me.
Lyndall Derrig, NBN News. The stretcher was damaged during a night rescue at Point Plummer while the crew was attempting to reach a fisherman who had a fractured hip. A crewman from the Westpac rescue helicopter was winched down a cliff, but the stretcher fell into the sea.
What happens is we get quite a large downdraft. The air from the blades forms a column of air coming down below the aircraft. And what happened is that actually caught the edge of the stretcher when it was unhooked from the winch, and the crewman was unable to stop it. He had to prevent himself going over the edge of the cliff and let the stretcher go.
But now the service has a new stretcher. This one is made from titanium and is from Canada. It is more robust and is easier to use as it's considerably lighter than the old one by 14 kilos.
Much easier to manoeuvre and hopefully will not sustain any damage when we use it.
Lyndall Derrig, NBN News.
Federal police take on the tasks that go beyond state police, and that includes national security, an issue that would be expected to embrace an important port like Newcastle. But despite the heightened security alert across the nation, the office of the only federal police in Newcastle was today closed for good.
And I believe that at a time when there is an increased risk of terrorism, when there is increased instability in the world, that we need and deserve to have federal police here in the Hunter.
But the government believe the lack of federal officers will make no difference to the region.
Just having somebody stationed in a station doesn't necessarily mean, in a federal sense, that it stops any of the crimes.
Today, federal police declined to comment on the matter, saying they were disappointed by claims which suggested they were abandoning Newcastle. They said they were currently conducting interviews for a new federal officer who would be operating out of this Centrelink office at Cardiff within 2 weeks. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
For the first time in many years, George Soros was in the background today, quietly accepting of what he called a generational change in party leadership.
I didn't contest this leadership because I understood that I had insufficient support.
Having borne the brunt of criticism for the Nationals' poor election showing, Mr Soros stood aside, but says he's still keen to pursue a senior party role.
And I have pledged myself in the party room, as I do again now publicly, to the new leadership team and to the greater good of the National Party.
And already a frontbench position looks a certainty.
Yes, that's my intention, is to have George remain as a very senior leader of the front bench, and I do want to acknowledge George's enormous contribution to the National Party over many years.
In another shake-up, Don Page has replaced Mar Lakes MP John Turner as Deputy Leader. Meantime, ALP member for Cessnock Kerry Hickey will find out on Wednesday what his role will be in the New Look Car Ministry. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News. Surfers made the most of the consistent 1 to 1.5 metre swell at Newcastle Beach today. Old Bar's Ben Dunn manoeuvred through the clean waves with ease, and while Hawaii's 5-time junior national champion Dustin Kuzon had a shaky start to the heat, he bounced back to post a 7.83, which put him in first place. But soon after, fellow Hawaiian Makala Jones caught the crowd's attention with this sensational ride. It earned him a 9.33, the highest individual score of the day and the Mark Richards Pro so far.
I just lucked into that one, just happened to come my way, so took advantage of it and happy I stayed on my feet.
Kuzon also advanced through to the next round.
I seen him catch that set and I already knew that he wanted a good score and he actually got it, so I was pretty stoked for him, but at least I made it too.
In the earlier heats, Dan Dingham from the South Coast made it through to the 4th round. In Heat 12, there was a notable absence, with previous winner Michael Campbell a no-show. That heat was won by the Gold Coast's Matt Watson. Tom Innes will also take to the water tomorrow. Lyndall Derrig, NBN News. Mark Hughes is more determined than ever to prove himself on the field against the Melbourne Storm. It's been a long and drawn-out recovery for the Knights centre since he was injured last August. The 26-year-old will start on the bench on Saturday.
It's a little nervous and very excited to be back. It's been a long time since I've played with the first grade team, so really looking forward to it.
Tamana Tahu will also return from the sidelines. Craig Hall will replace Josh Smith. And at this stage, coach Michael Hagan isn't counting on Ben Kennedy to return to the field, although he'll make a final decision on Friday. Meanwhile, the Knights have analysed tapes of last weekend's disappointing loss to the Eels and now have a different spin on the match.
We were certainly guilty of a few indiscretions in the first part of the game, and our ball control wasn't great under the circumstances, so we need to really focus and look at our own performance and not search for other reasons as to why we got beat. So
a lot of the guys were disappointed in how they played last week, so what better way than to turn things around with a good performance back home in front of a good crowd.
Lyndall Derrig, NBN News.
This was the outcome of this morning's vicious attack on 2 Year 11 students, seriously wounded by the bolt of a crossbow fired by a fellow student. Doctors say both are lucky to be alive after the single shot passed straight through the chest of the first victim, narrowly missing her heart, before piercing the legs of another. It happened at the Tomaree High School near Nelson Bay. Before class this morning, students watched as the horror unfolded.
He had a suitcase with him, which we thought, oh yeah, he's got a guitar in it or something. But yeah, there was something sticking out of it with plastic over it, and I suppose they were the arrows. And then all you heard was screaming, and the arrow went through her chest.
He stopped for a little while and he was just looking around, and that's when he walked over to where he usually sat, and that's when it all went.
And I saw like blood everywhere and screaming, like 'cause plenty of the girls were screaming, and everyone just ran away from the chick that got hit and that.
It was all very, very sudden. I think that most of the students were caught by surprise. It was done in an area where there was an extremely large number of students. A lot of them were obviously traumatised and very upset having witnessed it.
The boy was subdued by students and teachers until police arrived, and while ambulance officers worked to stabilise the two victims, firefighters rigged tarpaulins in a bid to preserve the evidence from the rain. At the scene, a blood-stained ladies' watch and a smashed glass bottle thought to have been a crude petrol bomb allegedly thrown by the boy. Worried parents began arriving at the school as news of the attack spread, and former teacher and local MP John Bartlett was among those at the school.
But it's just such a shocking incident. I mean, words can't describe everybody's feelings.
Police were quick to dispel parents' fears that the attack was random.
But we believe that relationship has possibly triggered this incident. It wasn't a case that somebody's gone in just looking for a random target.
The two girls are tonight in a serious but stable condition in Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital, while the boy is expected to be charged by police later tonight. The crossbow involved in today's attack is a prohibited weapon in New South Wales, prompting many to ask how a 16-year-old could get hold of one, let alone bring it to school.
These are the sort of weapons which we don't like to see out in the public. They're very powerful and very dangerous, and with the sort of thing that we'd urge people not to keep around the home.
Student counselling has begun as a team of 20 detectives piece together the reasons behind a horrific day at school. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
They're surfing's biggest stars, but today it was their young fans at the centre of attention. Surfing's most crowned competitors, Kelly Slater, Mark Richards, Lane Beachley and Lisa Anderson, brought a taste of the beach bedside for sick kids at the John Hunter Children's Hospital. And they came bearing gifts. Kelly Slater even had special mementos made up just for the occasion. For 13-year-old Lauren Anderson, it was a surfing dream come true.
It's fantastic. They're all really nice.
We're somewhat in our little bubble where we travel around the world and have fun, and we have our health and stuff, and it's easy to take that for granted.
They're here for Sunday's Surffest invite. For the first time, the greatest ever female stars will paddle out with the boys for the popular expression session.
It's about time Emma invited a girl, so I'm looking forward to going up against Kelly and Lisa and Andy and Emma in the expression session. There's 20 world titles between the 5 of us, so it's going to be an extraordinary session.
And it was a spectacular finale to the search for Miss Surffest last night. The winner announced from 13 finalists. The 20-year-old Rutherford model and actor picked up a $30,000 prize package. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
The car had gone under by the time they got there. They tried to get him out. They did their best. They couldn't see him, and he couldn't get his seatbelt off or something.
No, we don't. We can sustain the current rate of operations for the foreseeable future. We don't anticipate having a need to rotate these aircraft.
The Hunter Peace Forum took their message to the streets of Newcastle again, calling for an end to the bombing in Iraq. While the crowd size was noticeably smaller than rallies held before the war began, organisers say today's event was not pointless.
People are still prepared to come on the streets and protest and actually let the government know that this issue isn't going to go away. So, that's what we set out to achieve. Just keep the message up there in the public eye that this war is illegal, immoral, and we're still saying bring the troops home and stop the war.
A minute's silence was held to pay respect to the victims of the war. It was followed by a multi-denominational prayer for peace. From Swiss chocolates to rich fudge and the best local treats, it was a mouth-watering experience at Ivanhoe Wines today. And many chocoholics will be pleased to know the mixture of chocolate and wine is well suited to the palate.
We have dessert style of wines that really go with chocolate, and even a nice bottle of Fidelo or Chardonnay you can have with a chocolate on the side. So it's a really good match.
Some country boot scooting and street theatre added to the relaxed atmosphere. The festival also raising money for the Rural Fire Service, which helped protect the Becolban vineyards from fires last summer. The end of the harvest was also cause for celebrations at Broke. A country theme was used to help promote the region's fine wines.
They are unique to Broke, yeah. And each one of us has a wine unique to our particular vineyard also.
Lyndall Derrick, NBN News.
The Knights are still on a high after their sensational 44-28 win over the Storm on Saturday night. But while they were up 44-0 at one stage, they went to sleep in the final quarter, allowing Melbourne to run in 4 tries in 8 minutes. Afterwards, coach Michael Hagan gave his boys a dressing down.
Oh, I think we had a little siesta in there somewhere, and I'm sure the players are disappointed enough in that little part of the game, so I'm sure that'll improve for Friday night.
Kurt Gidley was the only casualty, hurting his foot. Hagan hopes the siesta factor won't appear again, with a solid game expected against the Bulldogs this Friday night. Newcastle United was hard in training today after going down 3-1 to the Olympic Sharks at the weekend. Currently last in the final series, coach Ian Crook says a United premiership win is possible but not probable.
I think if we won all 7, I think we'd be there. I think if we won 6 and drew 1, we'd be right on the borderline. So, it's a tough ask, a real tough ask. But I think if we gave up and said that it's not going to happen, then that's a waste of time.
Over the past few years, Pisces Marine has proven it can grow top-quality snapper and mulloway in these large cages off Hawk's Nest Beach at Port Stephens. Currently using 3 cages and selling mostly to Newcastle and Sydney, the company wants to expand and is trying to raise the $2.5 million capital needed to list on the Newcastle Stock Exchange.
Well, our goal is to farm about 750 tonnes of fish, and in the next 5 years, that will require anywhere between 8 and 10 cages.
Speaking at today's Newcastle Business Club lunch, Andrew Bald says only 6% of the snapper eaten in New South Wales is actually caught here. The rest is imported, mostly from New Zealand.
The fact is that we don't have to import so much fish. And the answer to meeting some of this shortfall in supply is aquaculture.
Pisces is to be the first hunter-based company to sign on with the NSX.
Those smaller companies, as long as they can raise capital, don't have to shift their head offices to bigger capital cities, bigger capital markets. It means they can stay in the region and benefit the region because they're able to grow.
Basically, we are a regional business and the NSX is a regional exchange, and we like to think that the local community who have supported it so far are interested in investing in a local business, and certainly the NSX has provided us with that opportunity.
Paul Lobb, NBN News. Mooring a boat at the wharf is one time when you really need your knot to hold. But this new stainless steel hook, developed in Newcastle, is said to eliminate the need for getting yourself in a tangle.
So you come up to your bollard, you want to tie off, just wrap it around, quick pull, slip knot won't come undone.
The slip knot can be used for tying off fenders and anchoring, as well as applications at home and camping.
A lot of people can't tie knots, they aren't Boy Scouts or merchant seamen.
It was designed by Newcastle commercial fishermen whose ropes were continually being damaged by tight knots, and the product is already raising a few eyebrows.
Yeah, I think we'll upset a few Boy Scouts.
Peeping through the clotheslines and over the roofs of caravans and annexes on this little hillside at Wangi are $1 million views across Lake Macquarie, or $63 views to be exact. At least that's the weekly rate Gary and Deborah Hardy enjoy for their slice of paradise. But the park owner, the Wangi Workers Club, has decided to close it down, eventually making way for an upmarket retirement village.
Oh, it was magic. It still is magic. You know, that was the reason we bought here. Was because of the view we've got and the lifestyle, and we're disappointed that it's going.
The club says the park, with its 110 residents, is not profitable enough and is no longer a good investment.
The prices of land in Wangi at the moment in the last 18 months have gone from, say, an average house of $200,000 to now over $500,000. They're the ones who are paying for the view, and I suppose this is what the residents here are going to lose, is the view that they have.
I'll be very disappointed. I think like a lot of other people. I mean, there's people been in this park for 28 years, 30 years. And I mean, to uproot their lives at this stage and shift them, I don't know what effect it's going to have on them.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Recently went on a trip back to Brook, and that was very emotional. There were 21 expats there, and you never saw 21 men cry.
The Hamilton family is still searching for closure nearly 2 years after the death of their much-loved Heck.
He was my mate and my father, and I miss him.
The 81-year-old grandfather was killed when his car was washed from a flooded weir at Barnsley in Lake Macquarie. Since then, his family has led a community campaign to have the roadway made safer. Today, Lake Macquarie Council submitted 5 options to the coroner, but said 2 of them, replacing the weir with a bridge or closing the road, weren't viable. Council said it would be prepared to undertake, and Railton didn't rule on any option, instead recommending that they review the safety aspects of public access to the weir as a matter of urgency. In making the recommendation, the coroner said the current litigious environment should provide significant impetus for council to follow through on the issue. A young man who earned a bravery award trying to save Hector Hamilton from the floodwaters says urgent action is needed.
The amount of people that drive through there, it's something that has to be done about it.
And the Hamilton family has vowed to fight to make sure it happens.
Get petitions up from people to make the council do something with that road.
Lake Macquarie Council says it will review the matter. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
It's now almost 2 months since the Nardell mine unexpectedly closed, owing a number of Hunter companies a total of $10 million. Unsecured creditors like electrical contractor David Priestley and coal processor Peter Braun have now learned they may only get a return of 17 cents for each dollar of that outstanding debt.
The offer is sort of bordering on the insulting, really.
I think nothing short of 100 cents in the dollar is a reasonable offer.
The major shareholder in Nardell Coal Corporation is Macquarie Bank. While it claims to have met legal requirements, the unsecured creditors believe the bank now has a moral responsibility to pay the mine's outstanding bills.
If it was a case of finances that they couldn't pay, that'd be different. But in the case of Macquarie Bank, I think they've just posted a profit of $270 million.
The Nardell issue has been a talking point in Sydney today. New Mineral Resources Minister Kerry Hickey has been told an operator is interested in taking over the Ravensworth lease. However, the Cessnock MP has asked Macquarie Bank to act with integrity and improve the offer it's made to the unsecured creditors. Gary Blair, NBN News.
A veteran of the ring, defending champion Mark Bajiro has won this belt on 4 separate occasions. Fighting his way back to top form, Shannon Taylor is still well above his favoured weight division, but the former world-ranked boxer went straight to work. Using a range of shots, Taylor worked over Bajiro, who took some big hits. The early rounds were all the bulleye blasters, but he couldn't land the knockout blow. Bajiro's camp urged him on. It had the desired effect, Bajiro connecting as Taylor began to take some of his own punishment. Out on their feet, both fighters literally threw themselves at each other. And some big bombs. With his title on the line, Bajiro chased points late in the bout. But Taylor had done enough early to hang on after the 12 rounds to take a split decision win. In an earlier fight, Gorican heavyweight Huso Smilagic went toe-to-toe with Brett Smith. Smith gave up 13 kilograms to the Central Coaster and plenty of punishment to win on points.
1 week into his term as State Minister for the Hunter, Michael Costa was breaking down a few barriers today, giving the public access to part of the harbourside. Business and community leaders were the first to step out along the new section of walkway extending from the old Lynch's prawn shop past the Crown Plaza to Merriweather Street.
But being able to link one of the best harbours in the state to the public that can use that harbour for the first time is a major plus.
But not everyone is happy. Parks and Playgrounds boss Doug Lithgow says there should have been more green space.
Now the green that you see here is private. It's all been privatised. It's totally against what was proposed here. It was all to be open.
You must keep in mind that where I'm standing now, there was the police wharf, there was a general cargo wharf. They weren't open to the public.
While the Honeysuckle Corporation says it'll take up to 10 years for the walkway to be extended all the way from Nobbies to Carrington, it says a temporary track should be in place later this year. Meantime, the new promenade will be a perfect spot to view the arrival of the cruise liner known as the World. The 12-deck luxury ship is due to enter the port at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning for a 2-day visit. Paul Lobb, NBN News. Since graduating from Hamilton TAFE, Brett Graham has worked at top restaurants in Sydney and London for the past 6 years and recently outcooked 200 top chefs to win the UK Young Chef of the Year award. Today he was back in town sharing some expert tips with the new breed of apprentices.
When I left here, I didn't know, a lot of us didn't know what was quite out there in the big wide world, but come back today and hopefully a few of them have sort of picked up a few ideas that they can use in their restaurants.
Yeah, just his attitude towards the food. He's got so much passion. Just so much to learn.
And few are more proud than Brett's former teachers.
To get his passion and the way he talks about food across to the students just lifts it all to a different level, you know, so they can really aspire and see those other horizons.
The Hunter students will compete in a cook-off later in the year, employing some of Brett's techniques.
Well, thanks, Jim. I found it very interesting last week to see some of the different reactions of the NRL coaches whose teams have been disappointing form so far this season. Now, there's no doubt that being an NRL coach is one of the most high-pressure jobs available. You have the highest of highs and, of course, the lowest of lows. But having said that, things couldn't be much higher for Paul Langmack, with South's boardroom debacle only adding to his worries that he hasn't recorded a win after replacing previous coach Craig Colvin, who was sacked for that very reason, made his victory over the Tigers a sweet one indeed. Likewise, Manly coach Peter Sharp. Now, his head was being called for last week after one of the worst performances in the club's history. But it only took 1 week to turn things around again by defeating the Dragons at Wynn Stadium. Now, that game provided an amazing contrast. Now, as you can see here, Saints coach Nathan Brown in these unbelievable scenes feels the pressure of his team also recording a dismal start to the season. But like Sharp and Langmack, it won't be long before Brown experiences the joys of being an NRL coach. Now, if you think Brownie's doing it tough, it makes you wonder what's going through the minds of two of the game's most experienced coaches in Chris Anderson and Brian Smith, whose teams are coming last and second last. Anyway, on to round 6 and tonight's blockbuster between the Roosters and the Broncos. I'm going for the Premiers on this one. On Saturday, I like the Bulldogs, Panthers and the Eels. Why on Sunday? I'm going for the Sea Eagles, Knights and the Warriors should win their matches. Anyway, have a happy Easter, drive safely and enjoy your football. Back to you, mate.
As we celebrate Easter this year, we are conscious of chaos in our world. Darkness covers the earth, the ominous shadows of terrorism, war, poverty, dissent and confusion cover us. While the war in Iraq is now virtually over, we are all the more conscious that the world will not be at peace until peace has found a home in the heart of every person. The key elements for peace to exist are truth, justice, love and freedom. Christians gather this week to remember Jesus Christ's struggle to establish truth and love. He went to his death because he spoke the truth. He rose from the dead because the truth set him free. May peace find a home in your heart this Easter.
The lighting of a candle brings comfort and hope. The Paschal candle, symbolizing Jesus Christ as the light of the world, is lit on Easter Eve. The candle is marked with the year 2003 and the Greek letters Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. It signifies that all time is sacred. The cross portrays the darkness of sin and the power of love to transform. 5 nails are pierced into the cross, representing the wounds on the head, feet, hands and heart of Jesus. The Paschal candle embodies a God who on the cross is wounded in the encounter of loving. As the flame of this candle flickers across sacred and scarred places, from Baghdad to Washington, Jerusalem to New York, the cry of every human heart rings out, heal our wounds, inflicted by others on us, perpetrated by us on others. Darkness is not the final word. Christ is risen, so light a candle this Easter.
It'll mean that we won't have to turn families away, and we hope that that'll then cope with the families that we have at Ronald McDonald House for the next 5 to 10 years.
Flags flew high over Swansea for one of Lake Macquarie's biggest Anzac tributes, a solemn service remembering those who went to war and the many who didn't return. With the ranks of diggers dwindling as the years go by, younger generations here are embracing the Anzac spirit like never before, many today wearing the medals of lost loved ones.
My dad's pops. My pops, my great pops.
And what does it mean to you wearing those?
Special.
For those youngsters fortunate enough still to have their own servicemen in the family, it was a proud day. With 13 great-grandchildren, age shall not weary World War II veteran Alan Wilson. They, says the 79-year-old, help keep him young.
It's pretty good, but primary it means I'm still on my feet and I can still walk.
And for those now not much younger than when men like Alan went to war, the sacrifice of our Anzacs is all too real. Thoughts turning to Aussie troops currently in the Gulf.
Especially with the war in Iraq now, anything could have happened. Like, people could have been conscripted there, so it does bring it home.
And on a day filled with mostly sombre tradition, another more lively Anzac pastime is also surviving the test of time. Hunter-punters taking advantage of the one day a year for legalised tour-up. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
This is the human face behind the firm's many family companies which are $10 million out of pocket after the snap closure of Nardell Coal. The meeting of unsecured creditors today overwhelmingly rejected an offer of 17 cents in the dollar to clear the outstanding debts.
The creditors decided at today's meeting that the company should proceed into liquidation, which that means they didn't accept the proposal that was put forward to them for the deed of company arrangement.
The group will now explore other options to secure their money, including possible court action, and they are determined to fight Nardell's parent company, Macquarie Bank, for payment in full.
We would like to get what we feel we're entitled to, and the 100 cents in the dollar is certainly what we feel we're entitled to. We've performed the work. There's been no complaints about the work or quality.
One hurdle in trying to recover the money is that Macquarie Bank has first call on $55 million it claims to be owed by the mine. A debt expected to be cleared by selling the Nardell lease if the move gets state government approval. What will happen with the coal lease mine by Nardell is expected to become clearer within days. Mineral Resources Minister Kerry Hickey is awaiting advice from the state's Crown Solicitor that could see the Cessnock MP have the last word on the future of the resource. Gary Blair, NBN News.
You're free, mate.
Fingers crossed Perry would get off. The Knights had prepared for the worst case scenario, which now means adding yet another young player to the squad.
I guess, we had Blake Mueller on standby to travel with us anyway, so he comes into the squad and Matt Jobson would start and Andrew Price starts in the back row.
Sean Rudder almost didn't make it, struck down midweek with illness, while Clint Newton has recovered from a muscle strain.
Yeah, no, they've come up all right, so we're fairly confident they'll both play.
But there's plenty still being said about that face raking charge. The Knights will hold talks with the NRL to get clarification on a charge no one had heard of before this week.
Contact happens, and I think it probably needs to be clarified a little bit more, and probably will be in due course.
Mate, you get your hands rubbed on your face, who knows, like a heap of times during the game, so something you just got to put up with. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty amazing, the ruling, yeah.
For now, the team has a Melbourne Storm fast approaching.
It's important for these younger guys to really take an ownership of the side and step up and play well, especially while the senior guys are out, and I'm confident they will.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Never one to fade into the background, Anne von Berto's image glowed across the congregation. Hundreds packed Christchurch Cathedral to farewell the 87-year-old arts identity who died on Sunday after suffering a stroke. Hers was a life filled with passion and beauty, today's tributes appropriately eloquent.
This lady was a comet who blazed across the artistic consciousness of our town for 40 years. Her death marks the end of an era.
Ms von Berto established her famous Newcastle Gallery in the 1960s, a pioneer of the local art scene. Over the next 40 years, she nurtured the industry and its talent in her unique, colourful style.
More radical and bohemian in her dress than the young, rebellious art students. I thought I must meet this woman, or at least find out where she gets her outfits.
Just weeks ago, she bequeathed her priceless private collection to the Newcastle Region Art Gallery, a donation which will ensure her memory lives on. And as the casket was led from the cathedral, it was a time not for tears, but applause, marking the end of a remarkable life.